It started with a cap. A simple, worn-out baseball cap with the Biden-Harris logo embroidered in faded stitching across the front. To Sarah, it was nothing special. Just a casual Friday accessory to match her laid-back jeans and sneakers. The cap had seen better days, but she loved it. It reminded her of moments she believed in, moments of hope, unity, and the promise of a better future. When Sarah grabbed it off the hook near her front door that morning, she wasn't making a statement. At least, not on purpose. She was simply in a rush, juggling her coffee mug in one hand and her laptop bag in the other, muttering to herself about the report she needed to finish before the noon deadline. She barely noticed her reflection in the mirror as she locked her apartment door. The cap? Just a practical afterthought to tame her unruly curls. The office was buzzing when she arrived, as it always was on Fridays. Tesla's corporate headquarters had a unique energy, one that made it impossible to forget you were working at a place where innovation was king and Elon Musk was the reigning monarch. Engineers hustled past her with prototypes in hand, designers huddled over sketches of futuristic vehicles, and the IT team was in a frenzy, troubleshooting server issues as usual. Sarah settled into her desk, her mind focused on the list of tasks waiting for her in her inbox. She was still relatively new to the company, just 6 months in as a junior analyst in the marketing department. Most of her colleagues were friendly enough, though she hadn't formed any close connections. Sarah was a quiet type, observant, diligent, and a little introverted. She kept her head down, doing her work and avoiding office drama. But that day, things felt different. She noticed it right away. It started with the stares. Not the friendly kind, like when a coworker admired your new haircut or outfit. No, these were more like furtive glances, quick looks exchanged between people when they thought she wasn't paying attention. At first, she thought she was imagining it. Maybe she had something on her face or spilled coffee on her shirt. She checked her reflection in the dark screen of her phone. Everything seemed fine. Then came the whispers. Low murmurs drifted through the air, followed by abrupt silences whenever she walked by. She couldn't catch what they were saying, but she could feel their words lingering in the space she left behind. It was unsettling, but she told herself not to overthink it. After all, Sarah wasn't one to draw attention to herself. Why would anyone be talking about her? And then came him. Elon Musk rarely made appearances in the open office space. When he did, it was usually brief, his long strides carrying him from one meeting to another, his presence commanding respect without him having to say a word. People would glance up from their desks, hold their breath, and try not to look too obvious as they stole glimpses of the man they worked for. To many, he was more than just a CEO. He was a visionary, a genius, an icon. Sarah had seen him a handful of times, but they had never exchanged words. Until now. She was typing away at her computer, immersed in an analysis of social media trends, when she sensed movement out of the corner of her eye. Looking up, she saw him, Elon Musk, standing just a few feet away, his sharp gaze fixed directly on her. Her heart skipped a beat. She froze, unsure of what to do. Should she say something? Smile? Keep working as if nothing was happening? Before she could decide, he spoke. Interesting choice, he said, his voice calm but layered with a tone she couldn't quite place. Sarah blinked. For a moment, she didn't understand what he was talking about. Then she realized his eyes weren't on her. They were on the cap perched on her head. Oh, she stammered, reaching up instinctively to adjust it. Thanks. He didn't smile. Didn't nod. Just stood there for a second longer, as if he were filing the moment away in some mental database. Then, without another word, he turned and walked off, disappearing into the hallway as quickly as he had appeared. Sarah sat there, her mind racing. She replayed the interaction in her head, trying to decipher the meaning behind his words. Was it a compliment? A criticism? A harmless observation? She couldn't tell. The rest of the day passed uneventfully, or so it seemed. Sarah finished her tasks, attended a couple of meetings, and even managed to sneak in a quick chat with a coworker about their weekend plans. By the time she clocked out, she had all but forgotten the brief encounter with Elon. But Monday morning brought a different story. The atmosphere in the office had shifted. It wasn't obvious at first, but Sarah could sense it, a subtle change in the way people interacted with her. Some of her colleagues, who usually greeted her with smiles or casual hellos, avoided eye contact. Others seemed unusually distant, their conversations with her short and stilted. Then there was the email from her manager. The message was short and vague, with no indication of what the meeting was about. Sarah's stomach churned as she read it. She couldn't help but wonder if it had something to do with Elon's cryptic comment on Friday. But that seemed absurd. Why would the CEO care about a hat? Still, the thought nagged at her as she made her way to her manager's office later that day. "Come in," he said, waving her toward the chair across from his desk. He looked uncomfortable, his fingers drumming lightly on the surface of his keyboard. Sarah sat down, clutching her notebook. "You wanted to see me?" "Yes," he began, his voice strained. "Look, Sarah, this is a bit awkward, but I've received some feedback about you." Her heart sank. "Feedback? What kind of feedback?" He hesitated. "It's about your choice of attire last Friday. Specifically, the cap you wore." Sarah frowned. "My cap? The Biden-Harris one?" He nodded. "Yes. Look, I don't want to make a big deal out of this, but it's been noticed by some people. And not in a positive way." She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "It's just a cap," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "I know," he said quickly. "But this is a high-profile company, Sarah. Everything we do, everything you do reflects on the brand. I'm not saying you can't express yourself, but maybe, in the future, it's better to avoid anything that could be seen as, divisive." Sarah sat there, stunned. Divisive? Since when was a cap considered divisive? Her mind reeled as she left the office. She felt a knot of anger tightening in her chest. Was this really happening? Was her job now at risk over something as trivial as a piece of fabric? Little did she know, this was only the beginning. Sarah was no stranger to controversy. Growing up in a small town, she had always been outspoken, often finding herself at odds with those around her. Whether it was questioning outdated school policies or voicing her opinions about climate change at family dinners, Sarah had a knack for speaking her mind. But when she joined Tesla, she quickly realized it was a different world altogether. As one of the few openly liberal employees in a company where most people championed free speech in theory but seemed to shy away from ideological challenges in practice, Sarah learned to tread carefully. Conversations in the break room often veered toward politics, but she rarely chimed in. It wasn't that she was afraid. Sarah wasn't the type to back down. She just wanted to focus on her work. Her job as a junior analyst in Tesla's marketing department was challenging enough without adding office politics into the mix. She was tasked with analyzing endless streams of data, crafting reports that shaped campaigns, and brainstorming ideas for Tesla's next big product launches. She loved the work, even if it often went unnoticed. Sarah believed in Tesla's mission to revolutionize the future, and she wanted to contribute. But after that brief interaction with Elon Musk, everything changed. At first, it was subtle. On Monday morning, Sarah noticed a few of her colleagues whispering as she walked past. Normally, she might have dismissed it as unrelated office chatter. But this time, their eyes darted toward her before quickly looking away. The uneasy feeling in her stomach began to grow. In the days that followed, the whispers turned into a noticeable shift in behavior. People she had worked with closely, colleagues who used to greet her with warm smiles or stop by her desk to chat, now seemed distant. They avoided eye contact, their conversations growing awkward and brief whenever she was around. Then came the meetings. Sarah was known for her meticulous preparation, often staying up late to ensure her reports were flawless. But now, meetings she had spent hours preparing for were rescheduled at the last minute or worse, cancelled entirely without explanation. The work she submitted seemed to vanish into a black hole, with no feedback or acknowledgement in return. The silence was deafening. Emails she sent, asking for updates or offering ideas, went unanswered. When she tried to follow up, she was met with vague responses or outright avoidance. It was as if her presence in the office had become invisible. Yet, at the same time, she couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was watching her. Her breaking point came during a team meeting on Thursday. Sarah had spent the week analyzing social media trends for an upcoming campaign, creating a detailed presentation that outlined new strategies Tesla could use to engage younger audiences. She was excited to share her findings, confident they would spark valuable discussions. But when the meeting began, her manager, Greg, barely glanced at her. As she raised her hand to speak, he interrupted. "Let's move on to the next agenda item," he said, dismissing her with a wave. Sarah's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Her co-workers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding her gaze. The rest of the meeting blurred into the background as she sat there, her carefully prepared work forgotten. Afterward, she approached Greg in private. "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling with frustration. "I worked hard on that report. Why wasn't I given a chance to present it?" Greg sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Look, Sarah, this isn't personal," he began, though his tone suggested otherwise. "It's just, things are a little sensitive right now." "Sensitive? What does that mean?" she asked, her frustration mounting. He hesitated, glancing around as if to ensure no one else was listening. "Let's just say it's probably best if you try to keep a lower profile for now." "A lower profile?" Sarah repeated, her voice rising. "Why? Because of the hat I wore on Friday? Is that what this is about?" Greg didn't answer directly. Instead, he gave her a weak smile and said, "You're doing great work, Sarah. Just keep your head down, okay?" The message was clear. Elon had noticed her. And not in a good way. Over the next few weeks, the tension only grew. Sarah began to notice patterns she hadn't seen before. There were unspoken rules, invisible lines she hadn't realized existed. Conversations in the office became increasingly guarded whenever she was around, and she started overhearing phrases like company culture and alignment with values. One day, while scrolling through the internal chat platform, she stumbled upon a thread discussing workplace dynamics. Though no names were mentioned, the descriptions of someone causing waves over a political statement felt uncomfortably familiar. The more she observed, the clearer it became, her cap had marked her as an outsider. She was no longer just Sarah, the diligent junior analyst. She had become Sarah, the employee who dared to bring politics into Tesla's hallowed halls. The realization stung. Tesla prided itself on being a forward-thinking, innovative company. Yet, here she was, being subtly ostracized for something as trivial as a piece of fabric on her head. Late one evening, after most of her co-workers had gone home, Sarah sat alone at her desk. Her computer screen glowed faintly in the dimly lit office as she stared at the empty inbox that had once been filled with collaborative opportunities. She felt a knot of anger and sadness tightening in her chest. Why was this happening? She had always believed in Tesla's mission to create a better future. She had poured her energy into her work, hoping to make a difference. And now, it seemed like none of that mattered. But Sarah wasn't ready to give up. As she packed up her things for the night, she made a quiet vow to herself. If this was the price of standing by her beliefs, so be it. She would endure the whispers, the isolation, and the unspoken judgment. Because deep down, she knew this was about more than just a cap. This was about principle. And Sarah had no intention of backing down. The tension escalated over the next few days, spreading like an invisible storm cloud over Sarah's work life. Though no one confronted her directly, the signs were all around her, subtle yet unmistakable. Snippets of whispered conversations floated through the air as she walked by. Words like loyalty and company image seemed to crop up with alarming frequency. Every time she entered a room, it felt as though the energy shifted, and her co-workers' voices would drop to a hush. Sarah wasn't paranoid, she knew something was off. But no one dared say anything to her face, leaving her trapped in a fog of uncertainty and frustration. What had she done that was so wrong? Was it really just the cap? Could a simple piece of fabric embroiled in political symbolism be the root of all this? She tried to focus on her work, burying herself in spreadsheets, market trends, and presentation drafts. Yet, even her work seemed to be under quiet siege. Reports she submitted were met with vague, lukewarm responses. Projects she had been assigned to suddenly shifted directions or were handed off to other team members without explanation. And then there was the meeting she wasn't invited to, the one she only found out about when she stumbled upon a co-worker's email reply chain. Sarah's usual determination began to morph into something else, suspicion. It was during a rare quiet lunch break, as she sat in her car in the parking lot, that she realized she couldn't just sit back and take this. Tesla was supposed to be a company that valued bold ideas and individuality. The hypocrisy of being sidelined for her personal beliefs, even symbolically, made her blood boil. She decided she needed answers. That evening, long after most of the office had emptied, Sarah remained at her desk. The glow of her monitor cast long shadows across the dimly lit room. Her fingers hovered over her keyboard as she debated her next move. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she had a feeling that whatever it wasn't going to be handed to her. Sarah had always been good at finding things, a skill honed during her college years when she was part of the debate team. She'd learned to dig deep, uncovering facts and details others overlooked. Now, she channeled that same energy into her search. She sifted through internal documents, scanned archived emails she had access to, and scrolled through the company's Slack channels. It was nearing midnight when she found it, an internal email thread that made her breath catch in her throat. The subject line read, "Potential HR concerns employee non-alignment." Her heart raced as she clicked it open. At first, the thread seemed innocuous enough, standard corporate jargon about maintaining cohesion and aligning with Tesla's mission. But then she saw it. Her name. There it was, in bold black text, standing out against the white screen. Her stomach twisted into knots as she read further. The emails revealed a lot more than she had bargained for. At the center of the thread was a message from Elon Musk himself. It was brief and to the point, but the weight of his words hit Sarah like a ton of bricks. Is this the type of employee we want representing Tesla? Her actions suggest a clear incompatibility with our mission and culture. Sarah's hands trembled as she scrolled down. The replies from HR and other department heads were no better. While some were hesitant to act without more evidence, others seemed eager to address the issue and ensure that the company's values were upheld. The language was deliberately vague, but the underlying message was clear: Sarah was seen as a problem. But it wasn't just about her. Buried further down the thread, Sarah found references to other employees who had been quietly removed or pressured to resign due to misalignment. There were mentions of subtle strategies to isolate such individuals, removing them from key projects, limiting their exposure to leadership, and encouraging them to seek opportunities elsewhere. And then there was something else, something that made Sarah's pulse quicken. The emails hinted at a larger, more troubling pattern. Phrases like external scrutiny and preemptive damage control appeared repeatedly, though they lacked context. One message, however, stood out. The risk extends beyond internal concerns. If certain practices come to light, the fallout could be significant. Sarah frowned, reading the line over and over. What did that mean? What practices were they talking about? She had heard rumors here and there, stories passed around in hushed voices about Tesla's aggressive culture, but nothing specific. Was there more to this company than she had realized? Her mind raced as she pieced together what she had found so far. The cap incident might have been the spark, but it wasn't the whole story. She was caught in the crosshairs of something much larger, a systematic effort to control not just the public image of Tesla but also its internal culture. Suddenly, her experience felt less personal and more like a symptom of a broader problem. Over the next few nights, Sarah continued her search, determined to understand the full scope of what was happening. She knew the risks. Accessing internal emails and documents she wasn't directly involved in could easily get her fired. But at this point, Sarah felt she had little to lose. What she uncovered painted a chilling picture. Tesla's leadership had been quietly monitoring employees for years, using advanced data tools to track their communications, social media activity, and even private Slack messages. The justification? Protecting the company from leaks and ensuring a unified message. But in practice, it appeared to be a tool for silencing dissent and enforcing conformity. Sarah found references to at least half a dozen employees who had been terminated or pushed out under suspicious circumstances. Some were described as difficult to manage, while others were labeled as out of sync with Tesla's vision. In each case, the language was carefully crafted to avoid legal complications, but the pattern was clear. And then there was the kicker, a confidential memo detailing a new initiative called Project Nexus. The memo was vague, but it outlined plans to further integrate AI-driven monitoring systems into the company's operations. The goal, it claimed, was to identify and mitigate risks proactively. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that it was about something else entirely, something darker. As Sarah connected the dots, a sense of dread settled over her. Tesla wasn't just a company, it was a machine, and anyone who didn't fit neatly into its gears was discarded. The values she had admired, innovation, boldness, pushing boundaries, were being weaponized to control and manipulate. But what could she do? She felt like a lone voice against a tidal wave, and yet, she couldn't stay silent. The more she uncovered, the more she realized she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every employee who had been silenced, sidelined, or forced out for daring to be different. One night, as she stared at her screen, she made a decision. If Tesla wanted her gone, they would have to do it publicly. She wouldn't walk away quietly. And as she began drafting an anonymous email to a well-known journalist, detailing everything she had found, Sarah knew there was no turning back. The day of the company-wide meeting dawned with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. For weeks, Tesla employees had been buzzing about the event. Rumors swirled about a groundbreaking new project, something that would supposedly revolutionize the industry again. The announcement was set to take place in the Grand Tesla Auditorium, a sleek, modern space designed to reflect the company's forward-thinking ethos. But Sarah wasn't looking forward to the fanfare. She had spent the past 2 weeks carefully preparing for this moment. Late nights, endless research, and sleepless hours had gone into crafting her plan. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about exposing the truth, about standing up for those who had been silenced and for the principles she thought Tesla had stood for when she joined. By the time she walked into the auditorium that morning, Sarah's mind was set. The auditorium was packed. Employees from every department had gathered, their chatter filling the air with excitement and curiosity. A massive screen dominated the stage, flanked by Tesla's iconic logo. The room buzzed with energy as people speculated about what Elon Musk would reveal. "Elon's really outdone himself this time," one co-worker whispered to another. "I heard it's a new AI system for autonomous vehicles." Game-changing stuff. Sarah sat quietly in the middle of the crowd, her heart pounding. She had deliberately chosen a seat where she would be visible to most of the audience but not close enough to draw attention yet. At exactly 10 a.m., the lights dimmed, and the chatter died down. A spotlight illuminated the stage, and Elon Musk walked out to thunderous applause. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his signature smirk in place. "Today, we're here to talk about the future. At Tesla, we don't just follow trends, we create them. And what I'm about to show you is going to redefine the way we think about transportation." The crowd erupted in cheers. Sarah's palms were sweaty as she clutched her phone. She glanced at the USB drive in her pocket, containing everything she had uncovered: the emails, the internal memos, the clauses in employee contracts that bordered on illegal. Her plan hinged on perfect timing. As Elon continued his presentation, Sarah's moment arrived. The stage lights dimmed for a dramatic video introduction, and the auditorium was plunged into semi-darkness. Taking a deep breath, she stood up. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. The audience turned to look at her, murmurs rippling through the crowd. Elon paused mid-sentence, his eyes narrowing as he spotted her. Sarah held her phone high. "Before we celebrate this milestone," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins, "I think it's time we address something important." The murmurs grew louder. "What's this about?" someone muttered. "Who is she?" another voice asked. Ignoring the growing noise, Sarah pressed a button on her phone, and the giant screen behind Elon flickered. To the shock of everyone in the room, it displayed the subject line of the email thread she had uncovered. "Potential HR concerns employee non-alignment." Gasps filled the auditorium. Elon's confident demeanor faltered for a split second before he regained his composure. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice sharp. Sarah took a step forward. "I'm sharing the truth," she said. "The truth about what's really happening at Tesla." Sarah began to speak, her words measured and clear. "For years, Tesla has prided itself on being a company that values innovation, individuality, and bold ideas. But behind the scenes, there's another story, one that's much darker." The screen behind her shifted, displaying excerpts from the emails she had found. The audience read in stunned silence as Sarah narrated. "Employees who express views that don't align with the so-called company culture are being targeted. People are being isolated, sidelined, and forced out not because of poor performance, but because they dared to think differently. And this isn't just speculation. These are emails from Tesla's leadership, including Elon Musk himself." Elon's face hardened, but he didn't interrupt. Sarah clicked to the next slide, revealing details about the monitoring systems Tesla used to track employees' private communications. "Tesla claims to be a company of the future, but what kind of future are we building when we violate our employees' basic rights to privacy and free expression?" The audience began to stir, whispers turning into low murmurs of discontent. "And it doesn't stop there," Sarah continued, her voice rising. "Tesla has been embedding hidden clauses in employee contracts, clauses that restrict their ability to speak out about workplace conditions, even after they leave the company. These clauses go against labor laws, but Tesla uses its resources to silence anyone who tries to challenge them." The screen displayed a scanned copy of one such contract, with the incriminating clauses highlighted in bold. The murmurs erupted into full-blown outrage. Elon, usually quick with a witty retort, stood frozen for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a tight smile, he stepped forward. "This is quite the spectacle," he said, his tone attempting to remain light but failing to hide the edge beneath it. "But let's not jump to conclusions based on out-of-context emails and assumptions." Sarah didn't back down. "These aren't assumptions," she said firmly. "These are facts. And if you're so confident in your innocence, Then why don't we let an independent investigation verify the claims? The audience erupted into cheers and applause, catching Elon off guard. The meeting ended in chaos. Employees bombarded Elon and other executives with questions, demanding accountability. Sarah's courage had sparked a fire, and there was no containing it. By the end of the day, the story had leaked to the media, thanks to Sarah's earlier decision to share her findings anonymously with a trusted journalist. Headlines blared. Whistleblower exposes Tesla's toxic culture, what Elon Musk doesn't want you to know. The fallout was immediate. Regulatory bodies announced investigations into Tesla's labor practices. Employee advocacy groups rallied around Sarah, calling for greater protections for workers in the tech industry. Within Tesla, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Employees who had previously been afraid to speak out now found their voices. Town hall meetings were held, and a wave of internal reforms began to take shape. Sarah knew her actions had come at a cost. She had made powerful enemies, and her future at Tesla was uncertain. But as she packed up her belongings a few weeks later, she felt a sense of peace. She had done what she set out to do, stand up for what was right, no matter the consequences. As she walked out of the building for the last time, she was met with a small crowd of employees waiting outside. They clapped and cheered, thanking her for her bravery. Sarah smiled, realizing that sometimes, it takes one voice to inspire many. A ripple effect. The days following Sarah's revelation were a whirlwind of emotions and events. Her actions had lit a spark, and that spark had turned into a raging fire. Major news outlets picked up the story within hours, broadcasting her brave stand to millions. Headlines ranged from whistleblower exposes Tesla's culture of silence to Elon Musk faces backlash over employee rights violations. On social media, Sarah's name became a trending hashtag. #StandWithSarah flooded platforms, with employees from various industries sharing their own stories of workplace mistreatment and silencing. She had become more than an individual, she was a symbol of courage, a beacon for those who had endured similar struggles in silence. But with the admiration came backlash. Anonymous trolls attacked her online, accusing her of being disloyal and trying to bring down a company known for its groundbreaking innovations. Some even claimed she had fabricated the emails for attention. Sarah braced herself for the onslaught, knowing it was part of the battle. Tesla found itself in a media storm. Journalists dug deeper into Sarah's claims, uncovering more instances of questionable workplace practices. Former employees came forward, anonymously or otherwise, to corroborate her story. The picture they painted was troubling, a workplace that celebrated innovation on the surface but fostered fear and division behind the scenes. Facing mounting pressure, Tesla's board of directors convened an emergency meeting. Leaks from insiders suggested that not all executives were on the same page. While some argued for damage control through public relations, others pushed for meaningful change. Elon Musk, known for his bold and often controversial public statements, broke his silence a week after the scandal erupted. Standing in front of a crowd of reporters, he admitted, "Mistakes were made. Tesla has always been about pushing boundaries, but it's clear we've overlooked the importance of supporting the people who make our vision possible. That changes now." Though his words were carefully crafted, reactions were mixed. Some saw it as a genuine acknowledgement, while others dismissed it as an attempt to save face. Behind closed doors, Tesla underwent a massive overhaul. The Human Resources Department, once seen as a tool to enforce the company's rigid culture, was restructured entirely. Key figures implicated in the leaked emails were quietly removed from their positions, though the company did not publicly disclose the names. New policies were drafted to address the issues Sarah had highlighted. Non-disclosure agreements were rewritten to comply with labor laws, ensuring employees could speak out about workplace conditions without fear of legal repercussions. Training programs focused on creating an inclusive and respectful work environment were rolled out company-wide. But perhaps the most significant change was the creation of an independent oversight committee. This group, composed of external experts in labor rights and ethics, was tasked with auditing Tesla's practices and holding leadership accountable. For many employees, these changes were a long overdue step in the right direction. "It feels like the company is finally listening," one worker anonymously shared in an interview. "It's sad that it took something like this to make it happen, but I'm hopeful for the future." The Department of Labor wasted no time launching a formal investigation into Tesla's workplace practices. Officials combed through employee records, contracts, and internal communications, seeking evidence of systemic violations. While the investigation was ongoing, regulators released an interim statement highlighting preliminary findings. The report confirmed several of Sarah's claims, including the existence of clauses in contracts that discouraged employees from speaking out about workplace issues. The department labeled these practices as deeply concerning and indicated that Tesla could face significant fines if found guilty of labor law violations. For Sarah, this validation was bittersweet. On one hand, it proved she had been right to speak up. On the other, it was a reminder of how deeply ingrained the problems had been and how many people had suffered in silence. While Tesla wrestled with its public image and internal reforms, Sarah's life took a new direction. She resigned from Tesla shortly after the scandal broke, knowing that her continued presence at the company might overshadow its attempts to move forward. But leaving Tesla was not an end for her. It was a beginning. Within weeks, Sarah was approached by organizations advocating for employee rights. They saw in her a fearless leader, someone who could channel her experience into meaningful change. Sarah joined one such group, becoming a spokesperson and advisor for workplace reform initiatives. Her days were filled with speeches, workshops, and meetings with lawmakers. She shared her story not to relieve the pain, but to inspire others to stand up for their rights. "I'm not a hero," she often said. "I'm just someone who couldn't stay silent anymore. And if I can do it, so can you." Sarah's actions had a ripple effect far beyond the walls of Tesla. Other companies in the tech industry began scrutinizing their own workplace practices, fearing they could be the next target of public outrage. Some CEOs took proactive steps, implementing changes to improve transparency and employee satisfaction. Others resisted, dismissing the Tesla scandal as an isolated incident. But one thing was clear: the conversation around employee rights in tech had shifted dramatically, and it wasn't going away. Labor unions, which had long struggled to gain traction in the tech world, saw a surge in interest. Workers who had previously felt powerless now saw a path to collective action. Despite the initial fallout, Elon Musk remained at Tesla's helm. True to his nature, he doubled down on innovation, unveiling new projects and initiatives that once again captured the world's imagination. But something about him seemed different. Insiders noted that he was more cautious in his interactions with employees, more willing to listen. Whether this was a genuine change or a calculated move to rebuild his image, no one could say for sure. What was undeniable, however, was the impact of Sarah's stand. Tesla, for all its flaws, had become a symbol of what happens when employees refuse to be silenced and when companies are forced to reckon with their mistakes. Years later, Sarah's name was still spoken with admiration in employee rights circles. Her story became a case study in business ethics courses and a rallying cry for those seeking justice in the workplace. But for Sarah, the greatest reward was knowing she had made a difference. Every email from someone inspired by her story, every handshake from a worker who found their voice because of her, reminded her that her decision to stand up had been worth it. As she once said in a speech to a room full of young professionals, "Courage isn't about being fearless. It's about standing firm even when fear tries to knock you down. And when you do that, when you refuse to be silenced, you'll find that the world starts to listen." They say the truth always finds a way to the surface. For Sarah, that truth began with something as simple as a small choice that carried a big message. It wasn't planned or strategic, it was just a reflection of who she was. But sometimes, it's the smallest things that spark the biggest revolutions. When Sarah put on that cap, she couldn't have imagined the chain of events it would set in motion. She didn't know it would lead to whispers behind her back, sidelined projects, or leaked emails that would reveal just how far the company's culture had strayed from its ideals. Nor did she realize it would thrust her into the center of a storm she couldn't ignore. But isn't that how change often starts? Not with grand plans or dramatic gestures, but with ordinary people standing firm in who they are. Sarah's story is a reminder that even the quietest acts of defiance can have an echo far greater than anyone expects. For Sarah, the cap wasn't just a symbol of her political beliefs. It was a symbol of individuality in a world that often demands conformity. At Tesla, a company known for its groundbreaking innovations and unrelenting pace, conformity wasn't enforced explicitly, but it was felt. You were expected to align with the mission, to live and breathe the vision, to be all in for the cause. Sarah's choice to wear the cap wasn't about making a statement. It was casual Friday. It was her way of being herself in a space that, over time, had become stifling. She didn't see it as a big deal. But the reaction it sparked, the whispers, the avoidance, the sudden coldness, showed her just how much the company's culture resisted anything outside the mold. And in that resistance, Sarah saw something deeper: fear. Fear of difference. Fear of disruption. Fear that even a small crack in the facade could lead to a flood. In the days and weeks after she discovered the internal emails, Sarah could have stayed quiet. It would have been easier. Safer. She could have told herself it wasn't worth the risk, that it wasn't her fight to take on. But deep down, Sarah knew the truth wasn't something she could ignore. She didn't stand up because she wanted attention or because she was angry. She stood up because she believed that if no one spoke out, nothing would ever change. It wasn't easy. Speaking out meant stepping into the unknown, facing backlash from colleagues, friends, and strangers alike. It meant being labeled as difficult, ungrateful, or worse. But Sarah didn't let those labels define her. She wasn't a troublemaker. She was a truth teller. And she believed the people trying to silence her were the ones who needed to hear her voice the most. Sarah's stand didn't just change Tesla, it changed people. Her courage inspired employees within the company to question the status quo, to demand better treatment, and to stand up for one another. It showed them that their voices mattered, even in a company as powerful and influential as Tesla. Outside the company, Sarah's story ignited conversations across industries. Workers in tech, manufacturing, retail, and beyond began sharing their own stories of workplace mistreatment. Her stand became a rallying cry for those who had been told to keep their heads down and be grateful for what they had. Her story proved that no company, no matter how successful or iconic, is above accountability. And it reminded people everywhere that the pursuit of innovation should never come at the cost of dignity and respect. Sarah's journey also revealed a powerful truth: courage is contagious. Her actions gave others the strength to speak up, to challenge unfair practices, and to demand better. For every email she received from someone thanking her for her bravery, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. These weren't just words of support, they were stories of real people finding their own voices. People who had felt invisible or powerless now realized they weren't alone. And that, Sarah believed, was the greatest victory of all. Looking back, Sarah often reflected on how it all began. A simple cap. A small choice on an ordinary day. It's funny, she would say in interviews, how the things we think are insignificant can end up being the most important. I didn't wear that cap to make a statement. But it became a statement because of what it revealed about the world around me. Her story reminds us that change doesn't always come from grand gestures or sweeping reforms. Sometimes, it starts with a single moment of quiet defiance. Sarah's stand left a legacy not just in the workplace, but in the broader conversation about power, accountability, and respect. She showed that true strength doesn't come from control or intimidation, it comes from standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. She often shared this lesson in speeches and interviews. Don't underestimate the power of your voice. The people who try to silence you aren't as strong as they seem. They're afraid of what your truth will reveal. But the truth is the most powerful thing we have. And once it's out, it can't be ignored. Years after the events at Tesla, Sarah's name became synonymous with resilience and integrity. Her story was taught in business ethics classes, discussed in boardrooms, and shared among workers looking for hope. But for Sarah, her greatest achievement wasn't the recognition or the accolades. It was the knowledge that she had made a difference not just for herself, but for countless others who found strength in her story. Sarah often ended her speeches with these words. Sometimes, the people who try to silence you need your voice the most. They need to be reminded of what they've forgotten, that every person deserves respect, every voice deserves to be heard, and every truth deserves to be told. So don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to be the spark. Because you never know what kind of fire it might light. And with that, Sarah left the world a little brighter, proving that even the smallest acts of defiance can lead to the biggest revolutions. This extended closing section captures Sarah's reflections, the impact of her actions, and the broader lessons her story conveys. It emphasizes her journey while inspiring others to find their own courage.